Before we move to the next section, I would like to explain you a little bit more about static vs non-static properties and methods, because it's fairly important to understand a few things before we're gonna dive into the object-oriented programming with PHP. The best way to do this is to demonstrate. So obviously, if we create inside of the classes folder, if we create a new file and call it test.php and create our test class test, opening and closing curly brace. Now, what we're going to do first, we define public static parameter called first name, and we assign some name to it. I will use my first name. Then we'll define a non-static parameter, which will be public as well, last name, and I'm going to use my last name. Okay, so we have static and non-static parameter. Now if we create our non-static method, public function get user. And let's create another one, which will be static, public static function get f name for first name. Now if we open our index.php, let's comment our core instance and the method, and let's create a new instance. Let's call it obj for object test equals new test. We are instantiating this class, and we are instantiating this class because we will be using get user function method. If we were about to use only get fname method, then we wouldn't need to instantiate this class. But because this class has static and non-static methods, this is why we instantiating this, because obviously in order to call this get user, we need to have an instance. So now if we use our instance of the class and call our first method, which was get user, if we copy the name and we echo this method, if we go to our browser, obviously template is gonna be gone and the page is blank. That's all fine, because obviously there's nothing inside of this method yet. So let's start with the first thing, return, and we use keyword self because we're going to be first returning the first name and our parameter first name. Now what do you think is going to happen? We're using non-static method and we're using static parameter inside of this method. Let's see what's going to happen. If we refresh, everything works absolutely fine. We have a first name displayed on the page. Now if we comment this line, and this time, because the next parameter is non-static, as you may remember, we are going to be using $sign and this keyword in order to refer to this parameter, and obviously our arrow sign, and the name of the parameter without the $sign, last name, and obviously we want to return it as well. So if we save the page, save our class, refresh the page, hey, there we go, our second name is also displayed on the page. So these two will work absolutely fine. As you can see, non-static method can use static parameters and non-static parameters, which is absolutely fine. That's cool. Let's move to our static method now. Let's first try to return our static parameter first name. Self first name. If we now we obviously have to call this method as well on our page. Only this time we don't need any of these. If we comment these two and we simply use test, which is the name of the class, 2 colons and the name of the method, and semicolon right at the end. And obviously because we're going to be returning something, we want to echo this on the page. So echo test and the name of the method. Now if we go back to our page, refresh the page, our first name is displayed, everything's fine. Okay, let's go back. Now if we comment our static parameter first name, and we'll try to return the non-static parameter using the same keyword as we did for the static one, which will be self. Let's see what's going to happen. Obviously with the $sign as well. If we're using self, save the page, go back, refresh, and hey, we have fatal error. Access to undeclared static property. This is because this property is not static, so you cannot refer to it using the self keyword. Okay, we can't refer to this using self keyword. Let's comment it and try to use this keyword, which we're using for non-static properties. If we use it like that, obviously remove the $sign from the beginning. What do you think? Is it going to work? Well, let's see. Refresh. Hey, using this when not in object context. What that basically means, this is static function. It has not been instantiated, so it doesn't refer to, it doesn't use the instance of an object. That's why you cannot use this within the static methods. The same as you cannot use self keyword for non-static properties. So this is something for you to remember. It is important to decide what kind of methods and parameters are you going to be using. If the class is going to contain methods which are constantly in use, let's say if we are doing things with the URLs, this is why our class URL has so many static pages, because we constantly use, let's say, what page, just to identify what page we are on, quickly get access to the parameter from the URL, and so on. In this kind of situation, it's pretty good to use static methods. If you need to do things with the classes where parameters or methods may affect something, and by being affected later on, you obviously may also pass the instance of the class to another class. So this new class taking this parameter has also these changes included in it. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated, and I'll try to explain this in the next video. But basically, static methods are normally used for things which are constantly in use, where you can access them from any other class, something quick, something done, this instance, without necessarily instantiating the class.